It's a story of three sisters living together. They were all widows, all in their 90s, 92, 94, and 96, living together in a home, caring for one another, loving on one another. And the story goes that one morning the 96-year-old was sitting on the edge of the tub. And as she sat on the edge of the tub, she cried out to her sisters. She goes, "I need help, I need help." She goes, "I'm not sure if I was getting in the tub or getting out of the tub. Would someone come help me?" To which the 94-year-old gladly responded and said, "I'm coming, sister, I'm coming." And so she heads up the stairs, and about halfway up the stairs, she needs to pause just to catch a breath. When all of a sudden, she cries out, "Sister, sister, will you come? I need some help. I'm not sure if I was going up the stairs or down the stairs." To which the 92-year-old says, "Oh, I'm so glad that I still have my memory, that I'm not like my sisters, knock on wood." Then there's a pause, and the 92-year-old goes, "I'll be right there, but I got to get the door first." If you didn't get that, ask somebody after the service. It would be all right. Listen, sometimes we don't know if we're coming or going, right? And in John 11 this morning, we have an account of a funeral, of all things, that oddly creates a question of coming or going. It's a crazy story that I'm sure you've heard, but pray that you hear with fresh ears this morning. It's actually a fulcrum point in John's gospel. Quite frankly, if you look at John's gospel, everything that has been written to this point is literally pointing to this moment as a pivotal point in the ministry of Jesus. And everything after it now is going towards the reality of the last week of Jesus' life. And so this story stands in the middle of John as a turning point, and a point in which we want to understand the reality of who Jesus is as he is revealed in certainty in John 11. Which is good, because if you've been with us, you know that's been the theme of this series, right? Jesus revealed. We've been looking at the Gospel of John quickly, moving quickly through it, but moving quickly and seeing the reality of who Jesus is, who he proclaims to be, that we might have hope in his name. But quickly, remember with me, who wrote John? Yeah, we haven't done it in a while, I understand. John, and it's not John the Witness or John the Baptist, it's John the Apostle who is writing this, and who's he writing it to? Yes, he's writing it to a lot of people, but I want you to hear it to the reality that he's writing it to you. And why did he write it? I will help you here. John 20:31 tells us exactly why he writes it. He says, "I wrote this so that you might believe that Jesus is the Son, is the Christ, is the Son of God, and that by believing in him you might have life in his name." That's why John wrote it. This text is the high point of Jesus' ministry to reveal that he is the Christ, the Son of God, and calling us this morning to believe in his name and to find life in it. And it has 4 points. I know that's kind of Baptist of me, right? Going beyond the 3-point Presbyterian sermon. But it has 3 points. It's a glory predicted. It's a glory proclaimed. It's a glory performed. And it's a glory prophesied. So here we go. We'll go in chunks this morning. It's another long chapter in John. We're actually going to read the entire chapter this morning, but we'll do it in parts. First is in verses 1 through 16. I want you to see the glory of Jesus, and therefore the glory of God predicted. It says this, John chapter 11. "Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus, of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to Jesus, saying, 'Lord, he whom you love is ill.' But when Jesus heard it, he said, 'This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it.' Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, so when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was." Feel the tension in that, right? My buddy's ill, so I'll stay here 2 more days. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. After saying these things, he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him. The disciples said to him, Lord, if he just fell asleep, he'll get better. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking rest in sleep. So then Jesus told them plainly, isn't it nice when Jesus speaks plainly? Jesus told him plainly, Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. So Thomas called the twins, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. A lot there, but I want you to hear a glory predicted. I hope you feel the tension in the text, right? Jesus has a great friend who is ill, and yet he chooses not to go see him until he is well dead. And even more, we know that Jesus can heal over many miles, right? So he just doesn't say, hey, Lazarus, be well, and he's well. He chooses to stay back. He chooses not to speak. And there's a tension in that. You think that a good friend of Jesus would be one who he would rush to attend to. It appears that he knew that Lazarus was going to die and that he was willing to let him die. And yet, the text says it's not going to end in death. You feel the tension? The other tension is that once Jesus says to the disciples that he's going to see Lazarus, they fear for him because they know that going near Jerusalem, which Bethany was just a bit out of Jerusalem, will cost him his life. To which Jesus uses some light and darkness imagery, basically to say, I've got to go. The time is now. Then after telling the disciples that Lazarus is dead, he says this, are you ready? And for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there. Why? So that you may believe. What the heck is going on? Which just brings these weird tensions together. And you got to love Thomas here. This is a whole nother sermon. But I love Thomas here, just as an aside, right? Do you hear him at the end? Well, let's all go, we'll all die. And so here goes Thomas. But I want you to hear the tensions. How do we make sense of this tension? Well, it's cleared up in verse 4 for us. Though at the time Jesus says it, I really don't think anyone would have gotten it. Jesus says, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Here, Jesus is very clear in tension. It's not going to end in death. How's that going to be? But it is for the glory of God, and so that me as the Son of God may be glorified through it. Jesus says that God is working in all of the tensions of this scenario. That he is in control of all the tensions of this scenario. And even more, he is working in all of the tension of this scenario to bring glory to himself. That it might be revealed that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. He's predicting glory. So no one really got it when Jesus said it, but I want you to capture this. When John is writing it, he's saying, people of God, you've got to get this. Remember, John is writing to a persecuted people. He's writing to a people who live in tension, that in following Jesus may cost them their lives. Why is there this tension? Well, John is saying, listen, even in the tensions of life, Jesus is predicting his glory. Are there tensions in your life? Come on, am I just preaching to me? Are there tensions in your life? Things in your life that don't make sense? That at best best, it appears that Jesus may be delaying. But if we're honest this morning, because I like to be honest on Sunday mornings, right? So like those cute little masks that you have, that everything's just fine, can you slide those off and just stick them in your pew rack right there? Because the reality is that at least I'll just speak for myself. You may have perfect lives, but there's tensions in my life. There are things in my life that I don't quite understand. And at best, at times, I feel like Jesus is delaying in bringing the answers. If I'm really honest, sometimes I feel like Jesus is denying to bring me answers. We okay? John, as he writes this gospel, Jesus, as he says these words, wants you to desperately hear that in all of the tensions of your life, that Jesus knows you. He knows where you are. He knows the tensions that exist. He even knows at times your unbelief in the midst of the tensions. And yet says, in those very tensions, I predict that I will receive glory. In fact, he says those tensions exist for my glory. Oh, that sounds maddening, doesn't it? I mean, if we're really honest, masks in the pew holders in front, the glory of God wants to come about from our struggle. Well, in these first 16 verses, I think that's exactly what Jesus is saying. My friend is sick. He's going to die. But I will receive glory in this moment. Glory predicted. Then to glory proclaimed. Verse 17 of John chapter 11, hopefully your Bibles are still open. Now, when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him. But Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this, Martha? And she said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she arose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. And when the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? Glory predicted here, very richly a glory proclaimed. I hope you see in these verses that you are not alone in the tensions of life. That Mary and Martha, who were very dear and close to Jesus, find themselves in a tension of life. You first meet Martha, the logically thinking Martha, right? And she's going to become a defense attorney here. I mean, she's going to make her case with Jesus. She says, if only you would have been here, my brother would not have died. And in fact, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Listen, out of the chute, an extremely faithful sentence. I understand, Jesus, your power. I understand that you could have helped him if you would have been here. In fact, I even understand that now that you are here, you can do whatever God tells you to do. There's a clear understanding that Martha has of who Jesus is. But I don't want you also to miss at least what I hear, a kind of hand on the hip. Jesus, if only you would have been here, he may not have died. Can you hear great faith? Love Martha. Oh, but so hear it. Jesus, I love you. I know you. You're good. But I'm ticked that you weren't here. Anybody ever experienced that reality? It's where I believe Martha is. But here Jesus, he says, your brother will rise again. And I think Jesus was about to go on in more eloquent speech. And Martha interrupts with her logic and says, I know. He's going to rise in the last day. I know he's in heaven. I know that in all things end, he's going to be with God forever. But then hear this miraculous, marvelous response of Jesus. One of those 7 I am statements that we keep talking about through the Gospel of John. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. Last week, Matthew Wells talked about I am the door, the gate. I am the good shepherd. And here he says to Martha, I am now the resurrection and the life. Listen, the logical Martha starts in the past, if only you were here, and then safely travels to the future. I know he'll rise on the last day. But Jesus meets her where? In the present. I am right now for you, Martha, in the tension of your heart, in the tension of your life. I am resurrection and life. Right now, Martha. In your grief, maybe even in your anger, I am here to offer you hope right now. And notice that Jesus does a similar thing for Mary, but in a very different way. Mary's the emotional one, right? Remember? She's the worshiping one. We always find Mary at the feet of Jesus, but Mary has the same response when she sees Jesus. If only you would have been here, my brother would not have died. I can guarantee you, Mary, Martha, in the midst of Lazarus' illness, have said this to one another. If only Jesus were here. If only Jesus were here. So Jesus shows up and he says, listen, if only you would have been here. Same words, but she expresses them differently, doesn't she? She expresses them in brokenness, in tears. So does Jesus have the same logical conversation with Mary that he had with Martha? Don't worry, Mary, I am the resurrection and the life. No, that's not what he does. What does he do? He says, take me to the tomb. And then he does what Mary is doing. He weeps. He weeps. So get this. Mary meets Jesus in her past. If only you were here. But Jesus reveals himself in the present. I am here with you, Mary. I feel the weight of your sorrow. You say, well, wait a minute. Doesn't Jesus know that he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead? Of course he does. He said this is going to be for his glory. He knows what's going to happen. Then why is he crying? Why doesn't he just get on with it? I do think he's revealing to Mary that he is present with her. But he's also, through his tears, proclaiming that he is the resurrection and the life. See, to be biblically correct, what Jesus does here is not just show empathy to Mary, He's just not crying because she's sad. But like with Martha, even in his tears, he's proclaiming his glory. Jesus' weeping is a different Greek word than Mary's weeping. Mary is sad. The Greek word literally means to wail. But listen, Jesus is more angry. Our English Standard Version says greatly troubled. The Greek word there is the word for a horse's snort. So, Jesus isn't wailing in a sad way. He's going, I mean, he's angry, right? What is he angry about? He's angry about that devil in the garden in Genesis 3. He's angry about the weight of sin. He's angry that the weight of sin brings death and that the death of his friend has brought sorrow. I believe he's actually beginning to feel the weight of his own death. And the way that he expresses it is a way that Mary understands. He weeps. Mary, I am here with you. But even more, I am with you for more than comfort in this moment. I am here because I have come to die for you. Ask yourself a question this morning, good Christian people. How often do we fly from the past to the future? I mean, I hurt in the past. There's this that happened in my past. Oh, but I know Romans 8:28, for all things work together for good for those who call upon the Lord, called according to his purpose, right? And so you start going to heaven. Like, life stinks now. But I'll put my Sunday school best on and immediately go to the future to go, yeah, God's going to work all that out in the end. But what don't we often do? Hang out in the present. And I think what Jesus is saying to Mary and to Martha, that he would say to John, that John says to us this morning, is that Jesus wants to hang out with you in your presence. He wants to meet you where you are at. The one who proclaims that he is all we need in the moment of brokenness. That he's not just a future resurrection. That's good. But he is a life-giving resurrection in the moments of our lives that feel like death. That he cries with us, but cries with hope of what he sees for us as he works to journey with us toward eternity. The glory of Jesus proclaimed here is a glory in the ugliness of the present. So let me ask you this morning the question that Jesus asked the logical Martha at the end of their discourse. Do you believe this? Martha's answer to this is great. I mean, John the Apostle has to smile as he writes her answer out, because she proclaims the very thing that John wants us all to get. Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. And I hope you know that as well this morning. That he is Lord, that he is the Christ, that he is the Son of God. But I also hope that you can see today what I think maybe Martha is still missing, that he is present in our sufferings. And wherever Jesus is, there is resurrection and there is life. As glory proclaimed. But hang on to your hats, because here we go. Glory performed. Verses 38 through 44. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. And Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Excuse me, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see" what? the glory of God. So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around me, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! I know you've heard it a million times. Can you hear it afresh this morning? The man who had died came out. His hands and his feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. I love to put myself in the place of Scripture. Would you go with me this morning to the garden cemetery? You've been walking with a large crowd of people. All the Mary types see Jesus crying, and they're all talking about, see how he loved them. And the Martha types are saying, yeah, but if he loved him, wouldn't he have healed him before he died? Right? Can you, like, Mary types that understand, like, you're crying along the way. You loved him, that was great. You're with me, a Hallmark movie, you cry. You've seen it 132 times. You cry in the same place. That's me, I'm admitting. Mary types, right? Martha types, critical thinkers. No, I'm walking to the tomb going, wait a minute, he's crying. But if he loved them that much, then why didn't he heal? Right? So feel the tension even as we go to the tomb. You come to the tomb, and it's a cave with a stone rolled in front of it. Very common. What will Jesus do? Why are we here? Well, he says, roll away the stone. And logical Martha says what? I love the King James here. Lord, by this time he stinketh. 4 days has gone by. When you roll that back, it's not going to be good, Lord. Hear Jesus' response, focused on the glory of God. Did I not tell you that if you what? Believed, you would see what? The glory of God. Oh, what on earth is he about to do? A brief prayer that we're all to hear so that we would get the connection of the Father and the Son and the glory of both. And here it comes. Jesus yells in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And he does. Heard this week that, sorry, this is an aside, that he had to use the word Lazarus because he was in a cemetery. If he just said come out, it would have been a whole kind of thing. But he goes, Lazarus, I don't know if that's true or not. Lazarus, come out. You ready for this? He does. Jesus predicted that the people would see his glory. He proclaimed that his glory was in the present, and then he did it, something greater than any of his signs. He took death and he brought life. And who is the focus at this point? I dare say it's not Lazarus. Why would I say that? Because Jesus says, excuse me, you probably need to go take the grave clothes off of him, right? Well, where is the focus? I believe that in that moment, the focus is on this guy who just said to a dead guy, come out, and he did. Probably not in a high-five, chest-bumping way. I'm hoping they're all on their face with Mary at his feet. This is one who brings life from death. There's some pointers here, some very clear pointers. It points to the resurrection of Jesus, right, from the dead. In Jesus' mind, he's going, you think this is good? Wait a week or so. It's a preview to coming attractions, which, listen, points to our resurrection from death in sin to life in Jesus. And it points to the power of God in our lives to bring life even into our apparent death in the circumstances around us. God is about life for his glory. But the pointers here are not pointed at how amazing we are. I mean, what did Lazarus do to get raised from the dead? He died. But the pointers are pointing to Jesus. Now, that'd be a great place to end, but there's more to the chapter. One more observation. Listen, glory predicted, glory proclaimed, glory performed, but this last point of glory prophesied. Here, this is a part of the story. We tend to end at verse 44, but there's something cool in 45 through 53. It says, many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees, tattletales, and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees had a Presbyterian committee meeting. They got together and said, what are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone's going to believe in him. And the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. But one of them, there's always one, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all. It's a good way to start. Nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish. Hang on to that. He did not say this of his own accord, John writes. Here's his commentary. But being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. I'm going to stop there. I want you to hear the glory of God prophesied to something much greater, believe it or not, than the raising of a dead man. So first, get to the response, right? The response of those around you in the garden that day. Lazarus was raised from the dead. And as I've often said, you know, the organist starts to play as Just As I Am, or as Matthew mentioned last week, Hillsong United, which is actually what we're going to play today, is played. And look, finally, many of the Jews believed. Like they're flooding the front, right? Here they come. They get it. A guy just got raised from the dead. Here they come. But what's the problem with that sentence? It says many. Why not in the world are they all coming? Well, it's because you got some tattletales. And they're running to the Pharisees, who run to their Presbyterian committee meeting to ask, what should we do? Because there's a revival starting. It seems a bit ridiculous to us, but I want you to get the real fear. The Romans were determined to keep the Jews in check, right? They could do their thing as long as it didn't make waves. But this Jesus doing this kind of stuff is making waves. And they are at risk of losing everything. And I'm not saying that I agree with the Sanhedrin here, but it does help us understand the response of Caiaphas on the surface. What does Caiaphas say? He says, wouldn't it be better for Jesus to die so that the rest of us can live? Can I say that again? Wouldn't it be better that Jesus would die so that the rest of us can live? If we kill Jesus, the crowds will settle down and the Romans will not flex their muscles. See it? So as the text ends, they say, okay, let's go find Jesus and kill him. But John's commentary here is life-giving. As John writes his story, he interjects here that while Caiaphas thinks he is protecting himself, he is actually setting the way for the gospel. Caiaphas says, Jesus must die so that the nation is saved. And John says, exactly. Jesus died so that his people would be saved. Because it is through the death of Jesus that sin is paid for. And that we have the hope of resurrection and life. Oh, people of God, get the bigness of God. The glory of God. That even among the enemies of God, God is working his plan. Maybe the point here is that God in all his glory often uses unexpected places to show his glory. A scared Caiaphas actually makes a statement and a move that is part of the plan of God to bring salvation even to you and me. I got to tell a quick story. Last weekend, some of you didn't realize that I was missing, but I was. Matthew's just that good. It's like, do we have a senior pastor? Anyways, where I was last week was in Indiana, Pennsylvania, celebrating with my wife. Her the band that she marched with at IUP was celebrating their 100th anniversary of tradition. So if you know the IUP marching band, it's a bit of a cult. I'll say that up front. So there's a huge following. There were 900 alumni and friends that came together for this thing. There were 500 of them on the marching field that Saturday afternoon. Why? Because they love the tradition of the IUP marching band. But here's my point. Back about 5 years before you were at IUP, Dr. Cassman, who's not a Christian, thought it'd be really cool to play Amazing Grace as a part of a halftime show. And so they played this song that was arranged just for the IUP marching band, and they played Amazing Grace, and the response was astounding. And so what has happened is that now for 40 years, it is the tradition of the IUP marching band at the end of the game to come together at the stands and play Amazing Grace, which the first part they sing a cappella and then they do it on their instruments, and everybody cries and everybody hugs each other and everybody just goes, oh, this is so powerful, this is so good. In fact, when they played it at the 100th anniversary, though the sun was shining, it started to rain, and everybody said, God is crying because he's so happy that we played Amazing Grace. Right? What? And then the rainbow, yes. So all that was really cool. But that night at the banquet, 900 of us in this room, and they show a video called Grace Sustained. And it's about how everybody's lives have been changed by amazing grace. Were they talking about the grace of Jesus? No! They're talking about a song. In fact, there's people on that we named our first daughter Grace because of Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace has saved our lives. And I'm not trying to pick on an IUP marching band and my wife, but I'm sitting at the table going, only if you knew what you were saying. Right? Caiaphas says, listen, I think I have a good idea. If we just kill Jesus, it'll save us all. He had no idea what he was saying. But the bigness of God is that statement and his, therefore, actions to go arrest and kill Jesus saved us all. God is that big. God is that glorious. And just maybe there are unexpected places in your life that God is showing up. Even the tensions of our lives that he is using for his glory in ways we cannot see. Life with Jesus can leave us feeling at times as if we don't know whether we're coming or going, right? But when we read John 11, we've got to see this. God always knows where he's going. God holds it all in his hands and is writing a story exactly according to script of where he is going and taking us along. And it is a place of resurrection. It is a place of life in his name. Jesus is using the tensions in your life to predict his glory. He is proclaiming in the tensions of your life the hope of glory. And he's performing miracles in the tensions of your life for his glory. He's even using things greater than the tensions of your life to reveal his glory. Do you believe this? Do we trust it? Then our focus this morning is not on our struggle. Our focus this morning is on Jesus. To give him glory. To know that even when we don't know if we're coming or going, we know that Jesus is in it all. That we may believe in his name and find resurrection and life. Let's pray.